All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. If you would join me in a moment of silence. And would you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Craig, if you would do roll call for us, please.
Sure. Eric Connor.
Here.
Joel Frericks.
Here.
Dale Porter.
Here.
Art Schneider.
Here.
Vito Schwartz.
Excused.
Carolyn Simon.
Here.
Craig Burt's here. Steve Waddles.
Here.
Sherry Winchowke.
Excused. This is an open meeting. It has been noted as such. Do we have any citizens' comments tonight?
No.
No. Okay, then we are going to jump right into strategic plan update presentations. We're going to start with student learning, Stephanie Blue, and Ben, your name wasn't on here. Ben is also with us.
Hi, Ben.
Sorry, Ben.
Okay, so we are here as our counterparts were last week, Christine and Dustin, to give two more updates for the strategic plan, both the student learning update and then Stephen will be giving the retention update. So Ben and I are here to present this. I just want to remind you as we start today that kind of like a football game with the Super Bowl, there's really one time with data that is a biggie for us every year, and that is when we can talk to you about the ACT and the forward exam results. We are not there right now, but we are wanting to move to having discussions about our student learning data more often, and so please be aware of the fact that the data that we're showing you today, we thought it would be a good time to remind former board members and to talk to new board members about our assessment, how we gather data. And it's not just with the one time a year forward exam and ACT data. And so Ben is going to be reviewing with you the kinds of assessment collection we do. We are going to share with you our spring screening data and what came of that and kind of predictions and goal setting that we're making from that. And then I'm going to review with you things that we put into place this year that we hope impacts this year's data, but also future data. So just a reminder that our goal around this is to ensure that all students engage with meaningful learning experiences and they're demonstrating growth over time. We last week just had a data retreat for 3 days with our administrators and then our staff. We had over 100 staff members come in to represent buildings the last day, and we talked about growth goals versus proficiency goals. And the reason that we like to talk growth and not proficiency is because it is simply not always realistic that all of our kids are going to get to proficiency as quickly as we would love them to. And so a growth goal, we're encouraging growth goals because we want to make sure that all of our kids are moving within the system. And even if a student is moving from a 10% to a 20%, we need to have goals in place for the students, so growth over time.
One thing I'd add to that too is that the growth goal also accommodates our stronger students too. And so those kids who are at advanced or proficient already can still make growth too. So we want to see that growth with them as well. So let's talk a little bit about data and just a little bit about some of what you already know and what we can share with you tonight. So usually you see me come out and meet with you in November, and we talk about state report cards and we talk about the release of our state data, and I'll come back in November to share when we are able to release that publicly at that point too. The state data is clearly our big data point. That is the one that is most publicly visible. It's the one that I think everybody really cares about. It's the one that makes the media, gets the news releases, and really gets the attention. And when we're looking at state data, basically is comprised of 4 different pieces. Forward exam, which is the one that the bulk of our kids take, grades 3 through 8. Everybody 3 through 8 takes the math and the ELA portion. Students in 4th and 8th grade also take the science portion. 4th, 8th, and I should also add grade 10, take the social studies portion as well. We don't pay as much, we're not as focused on the science and the social studies pieces, but the ELA and the math are really, really big data points for us. Our freshmen and sophomores annually take the ACT Aspire test, which is part of the ACT suite. At least they had up until this spring. It will be replaced by a different part of the ACT suite of assessments, the pre-ACT test, coming up this spring as well. And then there's the big one, the ACT test, which all of our juniors take. And we have that release day at the high school for our juniors to take that at grade 11. And again, that would be math, English, reading, science, and writing for ACT. There is a select group of students that we have that also takes an assessment called the Dynamic Learning Maps. That is an alternate assessment that is only administered and offered to the students that we have with our most significant intellectual disabilities. We're talking less than 1% of our students would be given that test. So it's a very small portion, but I want to mention it here as well. So again, like I said, the state data is our most visible data, and that is always released in the fall by DPI. Usually you'll see a news release for some of the data in late October, and then we have the state report cards that get released usually in November. The state data is generally good data for us to look at, but there are some disadvantages with that too. There's a huge lag time between the time that we take the test and the time that we get the results. So Forward Exam, for example, we take that usually in April. That's not actionable for us until fall. There is very little we can do with it until that point. And they're only single data points too. It'd be kind of like, to use Stephanie's sports analogy, it'd be like measuring Aaron Rodgers on the basis of one game and saying, did he have a great season or not? Not really accurate. You would look at the basis of a whole performance. And when we look at student performance, when we look at how our schools are doing, we like to look at the state data, but we also recognize that that is one data point, one moment in time, a small set of tests. So we try to look at some other pieces as well to measure that success. And so to do that, we have a variety of different screening assessments that we use as well. So there's district screening. At 4K, we use PALS, which is an early reading assessment, very simple, basically letter and sound identification. For the bulk of our kids, kindergarten through 8th grade, we use a suite of assessments called FastBridge. Now, FastBridge is an extensive suite of tests. There are a number of different tests that we have the ability to use in there, but there are a couple we focus in on. First is early reading, and we administer that to all of our kindergartners and first graders 3 times, kindergarten, fall, and spring, I should say. First grade, fall, winter, and spring. Early reading is face-to-face. Teachers will administer a small battery of tests. They're short tests, usually like 1 to 2 minute probes that are skill discrete. So letter sounds, can you identify different sounds? Letter names, can you recognize different letters? It's very actionable data. Our teachers find it really valuable. We find it very valuable too in terms of checking on how our curriculum is being implemented, whether or not we're being successful at those really critical foundational years. Then we have A reading and A math. A reading is administered to our students in grades 2 through 8. A math is administered to students grades 1 through 8. That's a fall, winter, and spring screener. That's also computer adaptive. So essentially, as you get more questions right, you get harder questions. As you get some questions wrong, you might get some easier questions. They are survey tests, though. Let me make that clear. They're not diagnostic. In 30 questions, which is about what they give you, you're not going to be able to diagnose everything that a student knows or doesn't know. It's impossible, right? So what it does do is it gives us a general idea of where students fall within a continuum, and it also tells us generally how our kids are performing against benchmarks. So we definitely look at that data. You might be thinking, where's the high school data? And high school's different. Most high schools don't do a lot of screening tests because by the time students are freshmen, they're enrolled, they're slotted into maybe their Honors English 9 or their Standard English 9 or whatever math sequence they'll be on. The screening data just doesn't provide enough juice for the loss of instructional time in most cases. And so a lot of high schools don't do that, but we look at other pieces. We look at course data, how our kids are performing grade-wise, how students are performing in different courses versus some of the state testing that we take a look at. We can disaggregate those by courses. We also look at how students perform on things like AP tests, which again, those are bigger data points, but they are certainly giving us ideas about how we're performing from year to year and within years as well. The advantage of all the screening data is it gives us multiple data points throughout the year. So if there's something not going well, we can usually see it pretty quickly. It also allows us to check student progress and provide interventions as needed as well. One thing I wanted to mention that I'm excited about is I've been doing some work within FastBridge, though, to develop some internal cut scores that we can use, or internal benchmarks that hopefully are a little bit more predictive of how our students are going to perform on Forward Exam. you'll see the data in just a minute, and I'll share with you the bar graphs that we have from A reading and A math, and you'll see that we have very, very high proficiency rates on those tests on that screener. It's important to note that if you're looking at that versus Ford exam, you're comparing apples and oranges. They're two very different tests, very different sets of benchmarks. So what's helpful for us is to be able to create some cut scores that allow us to take the scale scores that are in FastBridge and apply them to what we might expect a student who is proficient on Ford exam to attain as well. So that's work that I piloted last year. As I review the data from this year's Ford exam, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to see some things that we'll be able to cast forward as well. Last thing I want to mention real briefly too is FastBridge also contains all of our assessments for progress monitoring. So as students are in RTI or interventions for academic needs, more significant academic needs, they might be assessed even more, maybe every week in some cases for those more significant interventions. And those are other data assessment pieces that we look at as well. Those would be, granular data at the student level. All right, let's jump into a couple of quick graphs here. And I wanted to show you just a broad spectrum of what we look at internally. I'm not going to give you every single grade, so don't sweat it. I picked 3rd grade and 5th grade and 8th grade. 3rd grade because that is a grade level that all research indicates that if kids are reading by 3rd grade, they're likely to be proficient readers forever. And conversely, if they're not, we've got a concern. I picked 8th grade because there's some data that represents, that shows that students that are really proficient in math by 8th grade are definitely on track to be college ready for math. And I picked 5th grade because it's in between 3rd and 8th, so you get a little bit of a mix in the middle there as well. So this was a reading that goes back 5 different years, and generally this is in the spring. The exception was winter of 2020, when of course we did not have a spring assessment. That's when we had to close down in March. So I picked the closest window that we had available. Basically anything on here, blue and green is good. Blue is college pathway, green is low risk. A low risk at not being ready for college level work when they graduate from high school. So we would categorize that blue and green as meeting our benchmarks. Yellow on all of these charts would be categorized as some risk. So those are kids who are likely to receive an intervention. And anybody in that red category are kids that are what we consider high risk and are very likely to be in an intervention or perhaps even have advanced over to a special education placement as well. So you can see at 3rd grade, we had been making improvement through winter of 2020, and then you can see that since the pandemic closure there, both in 21 and 22, we've gone back a little bit closer to where we were in 18. I think one of the things that this shows us that we have known, but we have data to prove it, is that our youngest students were the most at risk for a disruption to their learning during those pandemic years. I would say, spring of 2020, and then even that 2021 year when we had a lot of disruptions due to absences and whatnot. Clearly, it has impacted this group as well. This group, by the way, would have been 1st graders in 2020 as well. 5th grade A reading, you can see that even through the pandemic and through the last couple of years, we've seen growth in that student, which is giving us some cause for cautious optimism. That low or that high risk category all the way down to about 1% is really a fantastic score. So you can see with our older kids, though, we've seen continued growth straight on through the 5 years that we have performance indicators here. Now, 8th grade, you're going to say, Ben, you only gave us one graph. You shortchanged us, and I did, because at the middle school, we had actually looked for a little bit different and more rigorous screening tool over the years, and we had landed with a tool that we liked, which was the interim version of ACT Aspire, the same one that we administer at 9th and 10th grade. We liked that one. We got some good data from it. They were doing some great work in terms of standards analysis and items that the kids were getting wrong. And then ACT unceremoniously let us know last spring that they were pulling the plug on ACT Aspire. So back to the drawing board we went. So I only have 1 year, otherwise we'd be comparing lots of different apples and oranges. I want to let you know that we are still looking at something for the middle school that we think is a better fit. Just haven't found it yet. And we're not going to bounce from tool to tool without a good reason. But you can see here we have 1 year's worth of data. I hate to make a lot of conclusions based on 1 year. I have no context. I don't know if that's great compared to previous years or if that's not so great, but you get a sense of where our students there fell as well. Then 3rd grade math, and you can take a look there. You see the same sort of dip between 2020 and 2021, but on the whole, the trend line is going the right direction. We saw a few gains from 21 back to 22 this year as well. And then grade 5 A math. Again, that same trajectory where Maybe a modest decline in 2021. You see that our college pathway dropped a little bit, but the overall groups of kids that were in that blue and green that I said were really strong stayed pretty high. And so we saw, again, some gains coming back into this year.
I have a question real quick.
Sure.
Are there goals? Are there looking at, do we have goals on these, red, blue, green, yellow? Are there, we want 80% blue and green, do we want 53% blue? Is there averages that we shoot for and that we know where we're at above and below the line?
Yeah, that's a great question, Steve. So I would say there are two sets of goals that we typically look at here. First is, without getting too weedy, in an RTI system, so if you're looking at is your universal instruction really working, you would want typically 80 to 85% of your kids to be successful on whatever assessments you're doing.
So on this, you want low risk and college prep. That's
Yeah.
basically those
Yeah.
are the two, right?
Yep.
Okay,
And
so
so we're
80% is really that benchmark.
80 to 85.
Okay.
Yep. You know, there's wiggle room there too. So we are definitely exceeding or approaching that mark in most of our assessments. I think the second thing I would tell you is from cohort to cohort and from year to year, we want to see growth as well. So it'd be great to, like we're at 85% every year, let's say. Well, that's great, but going back to what Stephanie said, that's not showing growth either. At some point, you get diminishing returns. You know, it's really hard. It's an admirable goal, but it's really hard to get everybody a proficiency. We're going to try, but every year we want to try to get that group in that some risk and that high risk a little bit smaller. So
year over year, we're just looking for a decline.
In those bottom
Cohort,
categories.
right, okay.
Yep, that's the idea, right? You know, and that's the one thing this doesn't show you is cohort data. So one of the things that we look at internally then is we look at how did third graders perform last year as fourth graders this coming year, as fifth graders the following year. So, and what's nice thing is it was with the state testing that we have too, we have cohort data now for multiple years because the state has pretty much stuck with the same testing for a number of years. We're gonna lose that now with ACT Aspire. So that gives us a little bit of a step back, unfortunately.
So do you attribute this favorable trend to any specific changes that you've made?
We're going to talk about that at the end. Yeah. I think there are definitely some things that we can talk to and speak to, and it's a lot of hard work by teachers too. I want to make sure I make that clear too. I'll just flash the eighth. Oh, go ahead.
Ben, does the state change this every 5 years, every 2 years, every 10 years? Is there a rhyme or reason why they? I'm not doubting the DPI ever,
No.
but people are smarter these days. Why the change?
So you're asking a question that's actually got a couple of layers to peel back, and I'll try to do it pretty quickly. So first of all, there's the actual test itself.
Sorry, Art.
Yeah, sorry, Art. You're not going to get out here by 7:30. So it's the test itself. So Forward Exam was actually a new test developed to meet newer standards that we had. Prior to that, we had some tests that I think were really not very good. WKCE, we had a year of Badger Exam, you might remember, before they pulled the plug on that fiasco. Forward Exam they've stuck with for a number of years because it's better aligned to the newer state standards that we've had. And it's just the platform that it's built on. But then the other question, I think, and I don't know if this was maybe what you were actually asking or maybe unintentionally asking, is cut scores. Do they change the bars that the kids are trying to reach?
That's exactly what I was asking.
Okay, so they do tweak that from year to year, but they don't make significant changes to that from year to year as well. They try to keep that pretty consistent so that we can actually look and see longevity, longitudinally, are we actually making any gains? And that's a fair question to ask because, of course, with the report cards last year, they changed the way they're calculated, and so it was a whole different way to look at them. So generally, the cut scores have not been changed. I can't speak to what ACT does because ACT is their own bird. But DPI also sets their own benchmarks that they use independent of ACT as well. So, but then you get a new test like pre-ACT, and we get to start all over again. So that'll be a learning experience for us. And one thing I'll speak to is we are exploring the option of bringing pre-ACT in as sort of a screening test for the high school kids as well. I don't think we're going to be in a position to do that this year, but it's certainly a discussion because it will give us some actionable data and it prepares our kids for the ACT tests, which is another really valuable piece. Same thing on the 8th grade math scores. I have no context for you. So again, I'm encouraged by the fact that the high risk number there was really, really low. I also recognize that the DPI cut scores for forward exam are pretty stout at 8th grade, so I don't necessarily expect our forward exam data to look like this at this point. But again, showing you that we are doing things in between the big test results. The last graph that I want to share with you is one that I'm pretty excited about. That's our 1st grade reading results. This is called CBM reading, and basically our teachers at 1st grade administer 3 reading passages twice a year, so winter and spring, and have kids read. And they're looking for accuracy, and they're looking for something called fluency, which is basically how quickly can kids read accurately. Fluency is a really good indicator whether or not kids are going to be good readers by the time they get to 3rd grade. And you can see the growth trend that we really want to see year over year over year. We saw a little bit of a step back in winter of 2021, but those kids were kindergartners when we closed down and they lost a trimester of instruction. Look at the bounce back they had from winter to spring of 2021. And again, nearing 80% spring of 2022. Look at that growth trajectory over the years. So some really exciting things there to be proud of and showing some good work going on. Questions on any of the graphs? Any further questions before I turn it over to Stephanie?
So obviously one of the questions we have as a system is what are we doing that's working versus where are we lucky possibly and haven't figured out what we're doing. So I'm going to show you a chart that we're putting together, kind of what, like Christine showed you from mental health. We're starting to just track where we're putting our money as a system and our resources as a system to make sure that we can judge our gains. So you'll see there that we did bring in a new literacy curriculum in 2017, 2018. When you're looking at the gains in our early reading, we strongly believe that the resources and the materials that were brought in during that time that align with the science of reading were a good decision on the district's part, and that we're really starting to see the gains there from that. We also, at the same time in 17-18, when we went to units of study, in 3-8, brought in, at that time, half-time literacy coaches and half-time interventionists. That in 2020, 2021, we changed into full-time literacy coaches. I think any teacher that you talk to in our K-6 buildings would tell you the value of having the instructional coaches there. And that's not necessarily the case in every district. I think in some districts you'd hear that that those staff members are in offices a lot or hang with the principal a lot or whatever narrative that would tell. We have built a model with our instructional coaches that they are in classrooms with our students 80% of their day or their week. And we really feel like we're making gains because of that. So this year, we are with ESSER funds adding 2 years of a math coach. We have hired 2 out of 3 of those approved positions because really want the right people in place. And I feel strongly that we've made really solid hires with 2 of them. We have interviews again this week where we're hoping we can find that 3rd. Those math coaches are really going to concentrate on working 5-9 in our system because that is where our data is showing that we need to stop a math slide in data. And so we're bringing in those math coaches to be in classrooms and work on instructional practices with our teachers. Yeah.
How many hours a week or a day are they with each class, or how is that broken up?
So our coaches are, the model that we brought our instructional coaches in would be, we do cycles with our teachers, and so they're not necessarily in 3rd grade every week. They'll be with a 3rd grade team usually. Usually they do those cycles in a team of teachers where they'll be in, let's say, a literacy classroom for all 3rd grade teachers from anywhere to 4 to 6 weeks, kind of the length of a unit. Where they're really working with the teacher and the students during that time. So they're going in, they're choosing learning goals, they're building that with the teacher, they're setting a goal with the teacher also that the teacher wants to improve on instructionally, and then they work together, and then they show data at the end to try to assess the number of students that grew or where things were during that time. So at this point, they're usually in every grade level. At some point during the course of the year. We are shifting that a little bit this year to go with the data a little bit more until we're solid that we have stopped any decline that we saw from the closure in the spring of 2020.
And how many is that per school?
We have one instructional coach per school. Yep, one full-time, and that includes our middle school and our high school.
Okay.
Yep.
One last, sorry. Is that
Yeah.
separate? Is that person a math coach specifically, and then there's a separate literacy coach, or are they
So-
both?
It's a great question. Our instructional coaches are one per building. They are part of our normal budget. The math coaches, were just bringing 3 in, again, to work 5-9, which is where our data is showing us we really need to work. And they are part of the ESSER funds, so the hires are for 2 years. I'm going to skip around a little bit, but we also want to remind the board, because we do feel like we're seeing some good gains from that. Also in 21-22, for a 3-year commitment through our ESSER funds, we brought in 1 per elementary school, an ESSER elementary position. That is someone who is, we brought those staff members in to work with our students in the 30th to 60th percentages, with the idea that we didn't want to see any more slide coming, and that they were going to concentrate on that, because we have interventionists that will concentrate on students that are seeing gains 30% and under. We've got really good things happening in the building, we believe, through that, and so we are going to have those ESSER positions work a little bit more with math this year also. Another thing that we are doing that I think is key in the district is that we have engaged all last year, the teachers engaged in some pretty heavy standards work. Like Ben mentioned, we do believe that we have a state assessment that does the best job since I've been in education of truly giving us standards and then aligning the test with those standards. But if our materials that we use aren't aligned with those standards, it's like taking the kids in to test and we're throwing a dart at a wall with a blindfold on. And so we really are spending time as a system and making sure that we are aligning our standards, and that our internal assessments, our classroom assessments, are aligned to those standards, and that we're regularly doing work at a level that the kids are being asked to do it on the exam. Instead of, again, having materials or having assessments that might be a little bit under where the kids are capable of. So when they're heading into those tests, everybody has worked really, really hard, but we're not meeting those benchmarks. Then also, we brought in this year, again through ESSER funds, reading training for our K-2 staff. So every single staff member in our system who is involved in teaching a student how to read went through pretty extensive science of reading training or professional development this year. They're continuing it into this summer. I think most of the staff members who have completed it would say it is absolutely going to be a game changer in how they tackle students that are not learning how to read or moving forward. I would not have had you talk to the teachers at the very beginning of the year because it was a bumpy start. But I think now that they're done with units 3 and 4, we're going to definitely see a bump in things because of an understanding that we're bringing in. A lot of teachers haven't had this kind of training truly to teach a student how to read. So I'm grateful that we were able to use the funds for that. And then this last slide is a little bit more math related. We did the Big Ideas adoption in 2019 and then 5th grade in 2020. We have not, just in choosing the resources, seen the bump in math that we would like to see. And we've spent a lot of time on literacy as a district. And so this year greatly will be about math practices and the math standards work also. To make sure that we're not seeing any more slides in math. We're also in the midst of a social studies adoption. I do believe social studies adoptions are pretty key in literacy scores in a district. If we're doing it right, that we should also see bump in our literacy scores just from the amount of time that we're spending talking about the standards and literacy standards and social studies. So those are some of the key things that are happening as a system. Questions at all?
Wow. That's a lot to think about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No questions, but thank you.
Thanks, guys.
I appreciate the information. And then we have Stephen coming to talk about staff retention for the strategic plan.
All right, the strategic plan as it relates to human resources, and from a time frame perspective, this is a good time to take a look at how the hiring season has gone and to gather some of the things that we've learned as we've gone through it. At the same time, I definitely think that come September, October, as it concludes fully, there will be a lot of information as human resource directors do speak about retention rates. And so what's helpful in that regard is we're able then to see how we compare. Are the experiences that we're having similar to other districts? And so we've got some district level information now, but again, we'll be able to follow up with greater information once we know how we compare to our neighbors in similar districts. So tying it right away to our goal statement, our goal is to utilize best practices to hire, retain, engage, and develop a skilled and talented workforce to serve students, the district, and the community. As many principals, as many administrators will say, one of the most important things that a school does is hire, and that is an extremely important thing, especially in terms of the research. Having an excellent teacher in front of students it yields great outcomes. So that's such a critical role. So to date, we've had a total of 27 teacher resignations, and we've had 11 retirements. And I will say that to the records that I've been able to consult, that's more resignations than we've seen in the recent past. As to the retirements, there was a increase that was given to the retirement fund for folks that chose to retire. So that very likely had an impact on the number of folks deciding to retire. So there's quite a lot of opportunity here to continue to grow our community in terms of teaching staff and to honor those that have worked and done great things with kids here. So with that, getting a chance to take a look at all the resignation letters and the conversations that I'm a part of, there are several teachers that did choose to leave K-12 education, which again, you evaluate that a little bit different than if they were heading to a different district. Again, geographically, there are districts where if you can shave a couple minutes off of your commute, over time that starts to add up, and that's a big thing, and it's extremely desirable for lots of folks. Some are looking for a fresh start, for a variety of reasons. We've had a couple of very, very unique years, and as is often the case, there is the conversation around salaries and how much folks are making, and in some cases, other districts are just able to support higher salaries.
Stephen, do you have
Yes.
numbers for these? When you say several, what are we talking about as far as several or more? I mean, do we have definitive numbers on what those look like?
I can get more definitive, I think in closed session. I also could, to really nail down, I do have a couple of folks, there's a couple of these categories where I'd be able to specifically say,
Numbers.
I could give you a number for it. So,
Sean, you talk to the other superintendents. I mean, do you guys talk about, because Waukesha's been getting a lot of press about resignations. Any, common themes or?
So I can tell you that when I've talked to other superintendents, and Stephen's talked to other human resources directors, as a matter of fact, he spoke to one today, many districts are seeing similar experiences. They're having similar experiences that they've had more people leave the profession or move to other districts for higher salaries. Now, that's not the case for all of them because some districts in our area pay significantly better than we do, and so they're not having people leave, obviously, for salary reasons. But we are not alone in this challenge. But nevertheless, it is a challenge that we face that we have to address.
So for exit interviews, I broke this down into themes that showed up in retirements, but then also themes that showed up in resignations. And These are some of the general conversations that were had in terms of retirement. Student discipline in the PBIS program, there are questions and concerns about that, and PBIS stands for Positive Behavior Intervention Support, and it really centers around the idea that before you hold a child accountable, you teach them what the expectations are, and you celebrate along the way. That's probably the cleanest and easiest way to describe what PBIS is. Concerns about communication, again, those are things that will show up commonly in a school setting. There's going to be a new superintendent at the same time. The other side of that coin is a great appreciation for Sean's leadership. So there have been concerns even among those who are retiring that our teaching salaries are not as comparable to other areas, which has an impact on staffing. In a general sense, and again, thinking from a thematic standpoint, is that they definitely are, in the majority of cases, saying, yes, Mukwonago is a great place to work. At the same time, the teaching profession is an interesting one in the current climate. So,
did you see trends on any of this? Is this building specific? Do you see higher instances of this in one building versus another? Are there grade level issues? Do you see any trends inside any of that information? Is it communication across the entire district? Is it in my building? Those kinds of, again, thematics.
I would say that there are some differences amongst the buildings. Yeah, I'm speaking at the broad level, but each building is a little different. Each principal is a little different, and so that's hard for me to speak to in an open setting.
Sure.
But again, these are not, at least in my evaluation, the only thing that was kind of unique that I thought was the PBIS concerns around that behavioral process. Because again, it's boils down to teaching expectations before you hold kids accountable, and then you celebrate along the way. So again, how that looks across places can be different, but it's certainly something from an HR perspective that I think is interesting to explore further. That's kind of where I would come from that perspective. So in terms of resignation, again, I want to be very clear, and I should have said this on the outset. We have a lot of folks that are sticking around. Year over year, historically, we've got good retention rates. We just came out of 2 historically very unique years. I would strongly suggest to this group to always keep in mind what this information can tell us, and also the limits of what this information can tell us. We're talking about a very small number of people in consideration to the sheer number of people that are employed in the Mukwonago Area School District. It's hard to easily generalize. It's just that's very, very difficult to do from one group to another. But we can still take some lessons learned in regards to how we look at this information. For folks that were looking to move on to another opportunity, balancing family and professional, some were requiring more flexibility perhaps than commonly can be had inside of an educational setting. More principal-teacher communication and support. Again, that showed up. Concerns about student discipline and PBIS, concerns about salary, and then also COVID wore folks out. I mean, that was a highly unique circumstance. But again, I guess the part that I found most interesting, and again, this is just me, I'm not speaking for anybody else, but the balancing of family and professional obligations when teaching has oftentimes been considered that kind of profession where you can. You work during the day, you're able to be home at night, you got the summers off. It's just a unique perspective, and again, we're talking about a small group. We have to take what we can learn from it, but we also have to keep in mind that this isn't necessarily going to be representative of an entire hundreds of employees. So those are, again, some general, I guess, caveats that I would just feel that was important to point out.
Steve, do you think if we implemented some kind of survey throughout the year for staff to speak out, we could head some of this stuff off? Because if people are leaving because of it,
Sure.
there might be other staff that aren't speaking out that feel the same way.
Yeah, the question, it's such a good one, and I know that surveys can be useful from time to time. How they get structured is incredibly complicated, I would say, and also the other part is anonymous surveys are, well, I've heard it put this way, that surveys tend to get filled out by 2 groups of people. People who like surveys, then you fill it out, and then oftentimes it can, and again, this is tongue-in-cheek, and I'm not trying to, be, humorous on a serious topic, but people who are unhappy. That's oftentimes the case. One of the challenges I think that can come up in a survey is especially when they're anonymous, there's limited ability to follow up. People will fill out surveys for a variety of different reasons. The other thing is just, again, they're complicated and they're many-headed beasts. And I would say too, as we get results back and we look at those sorts of things, we do want to consider the survey as one source of data that we would want to cross-reference with other pieces of data so that we're in a position to say, okay, surveys yield a lot of information. But the devil is in putting them together in a quality way and then also interpreting the data in a way that's useful and helpful. And again, people fill out surveys for lots of different reasons. And so I'll leave it at that. Any other questions?
Do they have to be anonymous? I mean, if you want to help,
Right.
the whole MASD.
I would certainly say that I prefer an honest, open survey. But again, of course, that comes with the cost of people maybe don't feel as comfortable. They're concerned who's going to see the results of the information. I think that if we're really, really clear about how we're structuring it, who gets to see the unfiltered, the raw data, and how those things work, those frank conversations could be helpful if that was something that we wanted to do.
I'll weigh in there. So we use Qualtrics in our district for a variety of tools, and its primary use is as a survey software. We use them in a lot of different ways in addition to that, but we can do surveys and set it up on our end to keep it anonymous. So we say it's anonymous, and then it's up to us to make it that way. So we have that ability to do that. So some organizations will do pulse surveys that are shorter in length and periodic, like twice a year, maybe 3 times a year, and that can be used. That if you have your metrics in mind, your questions, you can go about designing those questions to see if it's going to reveal the things maybe you're looking for. So that is something we could do.
Or maybe could you keep them anonymous, but at least trace it back to a certain building?
Yeah. I think those would. I mean, that sounds like an option, because what you could do is you could have people. You don't have a field to ask who the person is, but rather where they're coming out of, and maybe type of position.
Okay.
Again, it could come up in terms of the survey design.
Just last question I have on the survey. Do you support the ideas of surveys? Do you think there's a pro or a con, or do you say, yes, this is something we should actually probably entertain?
I would say we want to really, really do it right. I think that surveys, one, are very difficult to write. You want to have incredible specificity of what the question is that you're asking, what it is that you're trying to find out. I think we also want to consider, don't ask questions you don't intend to act on. That's one question that usually people get frustrated. I had heard a story about a question that came out about, do we want to have, and this wasn't Mukwonago, of course, but what are the thoughts on staff meetings on Saturday? It was kind of a unique, why would you ask that question? I mean, the majority of folks aren't going to be super wild about it. But asking questions that we're willing to act on, being very careful in terms of the interpretation. I think if it's done in a quality manner, and by folks who know how to do those sorts of things in a very, very quality manner, it can be useful. Again, it's what you put in is probably what we're going to get out, if I were to say it that way.
And as you know, next month on August 8th, you're going to start to meet with BWP, the superintendent search firm. And as part of that superintendent profile creation process, you will be getting input from all the stakeholders in the district, staff, parents, community members, board members. And as you create that profile, you'll get plenty of input on what the staff are concerned about, what parents are concerned about, and what they want to see the next superintendent work on. So that could be a part of this process, but we certainly support staff engagement surveys, and you just have to figure out when the right time to do that is. So probably not a bad idea is exiting to maybe do that later in the school year of 22-23. So the superintendent and the board have some ideas on what to work on. I do think as we proceed through this year, we want to have a conversation about updating the strategic plan. So it was approved in September of 2019, and when we put that together, we said after 3 years or so, it should be reviewed again and updated. So that's probably another thing you want to discuss later this spring and then do next year with a strategic plan. And it's good to have data to build that or change that plan. So I think you'll find those things happening in the near future.
In terms of this last year, there are a couple of things that I think are definitely of note. The human resources, human resources got now flow through human resources. Formerly the business department had been involved in support staff HR stuff. Business department is an enormously busy department, so bringing that to the human resources was helpful. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're certified staff, you're professional staff, or you're certified, that everybody has the same relationship with the HR department, and so that's certainly a positive there. And I do have to say too that in terms of transitioning, Tom was awesome to work with, so just want to say that as well.
Thanks, Stephen.
Yeah.
Good looking, too.
I like to say that just to get Sean's reaction. It's kind of fun to see. We revamped the human resources website. Now we can, if you go into it, you can see folks and who does what. You can see that. That's also part of my signature line. If there's an email that you get from me, you'll see that at the bottom there's a personnel services and who does what. We're going to be needing to take a look at that and get that updated. But again, being able to see in an easy, concise fashion everything that who does what, but then also how to become a sub, how to get signed up through TOC, but then also all of our job offerings, both certified and support, all available on the website, and that's a strong positive. The third thing that I would point out is that the business office technology staff and the HR staff, we work together to develop, to identify and implement an online onboarding system. Oftentimes folks come in and there's a ton of paperwork, everything's got to get filled out, and so what this process allows us to do is to have a strong record keeping of the things that new employees have to come in on. So now, if you like spreadsheets, this is going to make you feel really good. These are from the administrative side, you can see all the tasks that a person coming in has to complete. And so to the left of where location says, where that shows, there would be a staff name, but really what this does is it shows the progress that an incoming staff member has made to completing these different functions. And so it definitely helps keep people in line. It's not paper sitting on a desk so that you can get it misplaced, or whether you're business, technology, or HR, you can see what people are working on, and it creates a certain synergy. It's going to be awesome next year, but we started this year, and we started with the summer school staff. It's kind of our pilot. And so we're just going to continue to improve and refine upon the process. And so this is the administrative overview, but from an applicant side, this is what they see. They see a series of tasks and things that they've got to work out. When they schedule their drug screen and physical, they're asked to put in the date and time that occurs. And so from an administrative standpoint, we can help them get organized. We can help ourselves stay organized, and so that's a strong positive. And so it's just going to continue to get better. So, in terms of comparables, just to kind of begin to wrap up my presentation, Mukwonago, we started at 44.5 and we go up to about 90K, and then the insurance offerings from New Berlin, Muskego, and Kettle Moraine. They are somewhat different, and New Berlin has a lot of options. And I will say that it seems to me, and again, I've only been in the role for a year, but it seems to me that it's becoming harder to find this information. It's just, I mean, you can find it. It's just not always as easy to find as one would perhaps want. As a notable example, Menominee Falls has got a packet and it shows everything. I think we've got something very similar. So these are some comparables, but in some of my conversations, I have to explain to folks that FSAs, they're gonna pretty much exist across all districts. That's going to be pretty common, but our offering of an HRA to help cover the deductible is something that not everybody does. And so that is a unique and an awesome selling point for our package, and really helping folks understand that it is a package deal. You can get a great opening salary, but if the benefits are very expensive, then that kind of cancels each other out. And I believe the correct word for it is, in Muskego, the salary in advance of the, I believe it's called a tilde. That just means that's my approximation. That's my, I believe it to be right around there based on what I was able to see. So Muskego is going, it could be anywhere between 50 to 55 starting. And that is just something we need to think a lot about. So with that, going into next year, the idea of looking at a compensation model, something that that is energizing to all the constituencies of our district, and gathering feedback. We started with that 2 weeks ago, and so the idea is just as we go about these conversations, start to identify areas of consensus, and then develop a compensation committee with representation from all of our stakeholders, and then create that model. And so we've begun the discussion, in terms of the complexities around that. But the more frank, open, transparent communication we can have on it, that's a strong positive. So with that, this is us, Nick Bachtel, if you haven't had a chance to meet him, and Laura Stryka and myself. And I do want to again give a shout out to the business office, because they do a ton of stuff, and there's plenty of questions that direct deposit and payroll and reimbursements and all that stuff. Shevin Pollock and Linda Scafidi do an awesome job as well. So I just want to give a shout out to them. And if there's any questions.
I don't think so. Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.
We're going to move into the consent agenda. I'm looking for approval of the school board meeting minutes of June 27th, 2022, as well as July 18th, 2022. And approval of voucher numbers 137911 to 138336 in the amount of 1.5 million and change, and then the receipts for June of 22 totaling 11.8 million and change. Do I have any questions, concern, or comments? Okay, then those are approved by consent. And then we will jump right into our committee reports. Stephanie Blue is here to give an update for Student Learning Committee.
Okay, so Student Learning Committee this last month, I gave an update on the Human Growth and Development Committee, Advisory Committee for the board that's being put together. Our first meeting is actually tomorrow night. We have 15 community members / staff members who will be part of that committee, and I'll be updating Student Learning Committee as we go on that. There's 5 meetings. I think I sent you all an email that in case you want to come and observe. The Teacher Mentor Program, I also gave Student Learning Committee an update on that we are kind of doing a reset with so many new staff members coming in. I'm definitely passionate about making sure that we're supporting our newer teachers. And so we are doing a reset on that. We have about 70 teachers in our system coming in this summer. I offered a date in June, a date in July, and a date in August for staff to come in and get trained as a mentor. And so we'll be launching some new things regarding our mentor program to try to make sure we're working on retention of our staff that we do have coming in. And then we reviewed some Neola policies. There were no recommendations of changes made from those policies.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for Stephanie?
I had one question on the report. It was the possibility of a future Educators Academy.
Oh, yeah. So we are looking at, we had brought to the board a Skilled Trades Academy last year that just never got much traction, and so we've moved on to a Future Educators Academy. We did meet with a team of teachers. Dustin Lehman and I met with a team of teachers last week, and the first meeting went really, really well. We are super excited.
The program, I can't remember the name of it, but high school students gearing at, looking at, or directional towards that. Okay.
Anything to do with education.
Track, right. There you go.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Personnel Committee update.
Stephen, jump right in here, kid.
Awesome. All right. As a committee, we met on July 11th. We had a chance to go over the appointments, resignations, and retirements at that point. We discussed the elementary SRO and getting additional security services at the elementaries, as well as the recent legislation that was signed into law in regards to gun safety and the resources that might be provided there. And so we're also considering whether or not Fund 80 could be used to fund additional security. And we do believe that should be the case, that we should be able to use funds to do that. However, it's possible that we might need to, that may need to come out of Fund 10, our general fund, and if that were the case, whether or not the board would be interested in entertaining security staff that operated more in a part-time capacity. And so, obviously, that's a point of discussion. The other discussion that came up was during our recent board updates in regards to our handbook. It was realized that the health insurance benefits language that was being proposed for addition to the handbook, that it would be that health insurance goes through August, really only pertains to teaching staff that conclude at the end of the year with their contract before transitioning on or perhaps retiring. The reason for the change is that at the end of the school year, the end of the teaching school year, staff get several paychecks at once in which their health insurance is deducted from those checks. So that does cover them expense-wise through August in the event of their resignation at the end of the year. And the other policies that we looked at physical examination, unrequested leaves of duty, fitness for duty, employment assistance program, staff ethics, and whistleblower protection. I think the two that were, and I'd be happy to help with any questions on any of these policies to the best of my ability. The two that I think were worth maybe just a further discussion is that there may be circumstances where a staff member is unable to do the work that is associated with their position. There are times when, for a medical concern, there may be times where we may have to tell an employee that, no, you do need to be better before we can have you come back. In case you were to hurt yourself further, we wouldn't want to put somebody in that position. So there are times where that could be the case. Secondly, the whistleblower protection. It's a protection to those who are concerned that something's not being done correctly or within the confines of the law. At the same time, if somebody was aware of something that was occurring and they didn't report it, they equally could be held liable. We have to make sure that we're observing the law, and if we're seeing that it's not being observed in our policies, that we have to make that clear and known as well.
So are you saying, Stephen, that those policies are being worked on and updated in Personnel Committee because they are not here in action item?
Oh, my apology. Peer review. It was just looking it over, and that was it.
So no recommended changes to them?
I kind of like policies, so I do apologize.
Okay. Sounds good. Any questions for Stephen? Okay, thank you. And then I will, for our Finance Committee update, Joel?
Yep. We talked about student fees. I think we've got an action item today to talk about that. Some minor changes there. SOAR location, the current facility we're using is no longer available, and we're looking at some other options. We've got another action item to talk about Fund 46 and 73. We got a action item that we recommended the full board for tonight, and the same with tax levy. That'll come as an action item as well.
Thank you. So on July 18th, we did have a school board work session where we did look at just the history of the Mukwonago Area School District and the referendum history, as well as discussions about possible referendum, getting a timeline put together for possible community input as we look at the size of our elementary schools and what future we have for Parkview, if 6th grade can be held there, what that would take. Lots of fun discussion and just prioritizing the project as we look far ahead into the future. Nothing happening immediately. Sean, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, that was good.
Okay. So we will move right into our action items. We have our appointments, resignations, and retirements. Sorry, Stephen is going back and forth a lot tonight.
Our schools have been busy. We've got a number of appointments. We have Tama Minor, Prairie View fourth grade teacher, Julie Niles. Middle school Dean of Students, Courtney Kind, Parkview School business and marketing teacher. Jennifer Pike at SOAR as a special ed teacher. Rachel Cannell at RH Rolling Hills, special education teacher. Meredith Huber, high school art teacher. Emma Linsky, social studies teacher at the high school. Sabrina Black, a half-time 4K teacher at Big Bend. We have Abigail Richberger Cloud, sixth grade teacher at section, and Greta Doken at fifth grade at section as well. Then for resignations, we have Emily Stewart, who is our MHS Family and Consumer Science teacher.
I'd like to make a motion we approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. We have our 2022-23 academic standards.
So every year in July, state legislation requires that all public school boards approve the academic standards for the next school year. So I included those in a packet. Actually, none of our standards changed this year. We don't have any new standards, so I'm asking for approval of the academic standards for 2022-23.
Make a motion we approve the academic standards that are attached.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions, discussion?
One question. Do
Yep.
we know, are there any of these that we know are due for any change in the next 12, 24 months?
So I should know that off the top of my head, Steve, and no, I don't think there's anything. There's some elective areas. There's nothing regarding ELA, math, science, or social studies coming up.
That's my only question. I just don't want to get behind. I don't want to miss something. I don't want anything else.
Health is in review right now.
Any other questions? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. And we have the 2022-23 student fees.
Okay, I brought the fees here tonight for approval by the board, so everything is status quo, nothing's changed, with the exception of going to the one-time fee for athletics at the middle school and high school.
I will make a motion that we adopt the student fees for 2022-23.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions, discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Fund 46 and Fund 73 transfer.
Okay, so these are transfers that we're looking to make. Although the 21-22 school year is over, we have until June 30 to make these transfers, and we would apply these transfers and their costs within the previous school year that we just finished. So they give us a little time for the dust to settle on our financial end. And what I'm recommending right now is that we transfer $1,093,000 for Fund 46. I put an outline of what those things represent in my finance memo, and then $200,000 to Fund 73. That $200,000 is to give us any type of breathing room we may need in next year, or the current year's budget. We will look to finalize it in October, but we're just more or less pre-funding a known expense here ahead of time because we have the ability to do so.
I'll make a motion we approve the Fund 46 and 73 transfers as outlined in the document.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion and second. Any questions or discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And we have the 22-23 budget and tax levy.
Okay, so let's, historically, we do these separately because you may support the budget but not the tax levy, or vice versa. Hopefully you guys are good with both. So for the budget, we'll start there. We have a $58.5 million budget. It's balanced. We have slightly more revenues than expenses, but we are balanced, and that was always a goal. So that's for, again, this is our preliminary budget. We'll communicate this at the annual meeting in 1 month. We'll give more details about what's in that budget, and that conversation really evolves around teacher compensation and health insurance, because most other costs, for the most part, are pretty standard rollover from year to year. So that's the budget that we have.
I'll make a motion that we approve to adopt the budget that we see here in Fund 10 that consists of $58.5 million in revenue as well as in expenses.
Second, I'll second.
Any questions or comments?
Have we seen the full budget, or was that,
Yeah.
that was the one we sent out before, right?
Yep,
Okay.
yep, I shared that last, yeah, there's a memo that summarizes the details.
Okay,
Um,
nothing
and-
changed from that, so.
No,
Okay.
no. I do want to just add this, though. So this budget that we're looking at here is recognizing our basic budget. We do have access to ESSER funds and other federal, not federal, but other grants that are very one-time in nature. This doesn't reflect those. So this is really our internal budget. If those funds went away, they would go away, and whatever we're going to buy with those, we don't do that then. So this is really our basic base building budget, if that makes sense. When we come back in October, I can guarantee that both of these numbers will be bigger, but the revenues and expenses will go up and they'll match. So if we approve a $60 million budget, maybe we're using 1.5 million of ESSER funds as we move towards expending those here.
So this is preliminary approval, so next month at the annual meeting, our residents will hopefully approve the budget, and then you guys approve it one last time in October, so,
We get to do it 3 times.
yes.
Yeah, I've got,
Someday I'll tell you how we had to do it.
Okay, so we do have a motion and a second on the table. Any other questions or comments? Great. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that motion carries.
so then the tax levy, let's go through that one then. We're proposing a tax levy. That's a 0.2% decrease from the prior year. We've talked about our strategy of prepaying debts along the way here. So this tax levy has that strategy. If we were similar to what we did in May here, we paid off $5 million or $5.5 million of debt ahead of time. We're going to do $6 million this year and save that. I was asked at the last meeting, how much would we save? We'd save between $500,000 and $600,000 by doing this. So the message here, the basic message here is we're cutting the tax levy. So that's known. That'll happen in October. I have no issues with saying that now.
Make a motion, we accept the tax levy that pays off debt early and lowers taxpayers' tax rate by a little bit.
I'll second.
Any other comments, questions, discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries as well.
Thank you.
Okay, then we'll move right into unfinished business and start with the superintendent report.
Sure, real quickly, just a reminder that next Monday is August 1st already.
Oh, no.
And so that means we have 38 days until school starts. So August will go very quickly. We have a learning committee meeting on next Monday, August 1st, and then just a reminder that August 8th, the following Monday, that schedule looks a little differently, 5:30 for personnel, and then 6:30 when the entire board meets with BWP. And finance and facilities the following Monday, and then our annual meeting is on the 22nd, and that will start at 7 o'clock with a budget hearing. So the highlight of Tom's year, what he's been gearing up for the last 11 months, is that budget hearing at 7 o'clock, then the actual annual meeting at 7:30, and then our regular board meeting to follow around 8 o'clock. And our student reps will be back, our new student reps, so. And I think that's all I have. Did you have any questions?
How long are you staying?
So no questions.
June
Thank
30.
you. I'm just going to throw out a date if you want to jot it down and keep in mind and look at your calendars. January 18th to the 20th in 2023 is the Wisconsin State Education Convention for school board members, 18th to the 20th, yes. So you can look ahead and take your vacation days now, Art, so you can join us.
Yeah.
I would love to have you guys join. Any legislation correspondence? It
No.
doesn't look like it. Okay. Then at this point, I would entertain a motion to move into executive session for the evening.
I'd like to make that motion.
Second.
I have a motion and second. Craig, would you mind roll calling us out, please?
Eric Connor.
Yes.
Joel Ferrich.
Yep.
Dale Porter.
Yep.
Art Schneider.
Yes.
Vito Schwartz. Carolyn Simon.
Yep.
Craig Verts here. Steve Waddles.
Yes.
Sherry.
Okay. 2-minute break and then head into